I just finish my coffee first? Oh, that's delicious. Coffee, it's a drink. Old made me feel very, very uncomfortable. It made me feel like I was dying, and not in a good way, in a bad way. In a bad way. Just can't remember. You're on the red couch with Danny Gherkin. Old is a 2021 horror film by prolific yet infamous director M. Night Shyamalan. I'm reluctant to call it a film because it's more closely related to experiencing acute psychosis. For almost the entirety of this fever dream come cinema extravaganza, I was extremely uncomfortable, and if it weren't for this review, I would have turned it off for my mental health. I didn't, and just look at me now. Oh well. A quick guide to M. Night films. This is a very interesting man, a ball of yarn that refuses to be untangled. He made some forgettable things, then made a thing a lot of people liked, made a thing a few less people liked, then made many things that many people didn't like. He's had some big successes, and he's also committed some of the most atrocious crimes against the world, for which he will be punished. He is also one of the only directors I know of with multiple contenders in their worst film category. Here is my very quick ranking. Old is just the latest edition, and for my money, sits just a little higher than last place, with Lady in the Water farting in to take that spot. More like Lady in the Sewer. Plot, spoilers and etc. Old is about a bunch of people who go to a beach and then get old. The rocks on the beach are making them old, and quickly, but if they try to leave, the rocks make them black out. That's convenient. The sea is also too rough for swimming, and if you think they can use their silly devices to call for help, you're freaking wrong. There's no cell phone reception on the beach, you idiot. The rocks thought of that, obviously. Some of the characters have illnesses that get worse over time, and some of the characters are children who have sex. But don't worry, it's not weird, because the rocks have aged their mind. And you better bet your britches that there's drama. Stop. Can we have one flippin' review where there isn't any drama? Of course not. Drama. 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 There's PG-13 death scenes, there's bad dialogue, there's bad acting, and thankfully, there's an end. So why is Old so uncomfortable? Firstly, the direction. The entire movie from when we get onto the beach is too zoomed in. It's claustrophobic and provides the visual equivalent of being strangled. M. Night, I said stop it. It was so frustrating that at times I was literally visualizing ripping the camera out of M. Night's hands and pulling the shot back a little bit. But the story is confined to a beach, I hear you say. There's not a lot of room. That's a fair statement, except this too zoomed in makes you want to scream at the screen to pull back a little bit direction has been in many of his previous films, notably as early as Unbreakable. In that movie, there's no spatial constraints. This is just something M. Night to do, and oh boy, how I wish he didn't. Secondly, the actors. Awful. They're all truly awful. Damn, I'm on the beach and I'm getting old. I felt like I was being gaslit, like I was watching some weird video camcorder in a different language, but which had been dubbed over in English, except for the people doing the dubbing were from the country where they didn't speak English in the first place. It was extremely bizarre and deeply unsettling. I think the thing that shook me here was there are usually a couple of reliable things we can expect in an M. Night film. We have a twist, that's M. Night 101, and we have somewhat competent actors delivering pretty subpar dialogue. However, in this film, we don't really get a twist because of the way the story is set up. Let's discuss that more later. Okay, so we don't get a satisfying twist, but what about reasonably okay acting? No. The acting in his movies is almost always bad, even when M. Night has managed to nab an A-lister. But I never thought it would get this bad. It's like he went to a bus stop and rounded up whoever was there, then stuck them in front of the camera and said, "Now act." And now I know that I exaggerate a lot, but I'm dead serious when I say that the acting in Old is reminiscent of the acting in Troll 2, which literally had people from a random town put their hands up to be actors in it. Most of the time, it feels like the actors are reading off a script just off camera, kinda like me. Wooden, stiff, all those hard adjectives. No. It's not even fun bad acting. It's not like The Room or Troll 2. It's just soulless. Finally, the premise is actually really unsettling. I think growing old is something that we all fear deep down, and it's something that happens to all of us regardless of who we are, what we do, and the choices we make. To have this process sped up to where a year slips by every 30 minutes is truly horrifying. In better hands, this movie could have been a contemplative drama where themes of time and family are utilised more effectively while still incorporating the horror of the situation. However, we didn't get this. Instead, we rather got something that was more like a mash between PG body horror and reality daytime TV. How not to story? Inconsistency. This movie is full of it. If you seriously analyse any of the time stuff, it falls apart. The characters don't age as they should, and for large portions of the film, the adult characters remain largely static. There's a character called Midsize Sedan who's been on the beach since at least sunrise, so that's maybe 2 or 3 hours before the rest of the cast gets there, and that's been generous. But we never see him age. He looks the same at sunrise as he does for the rest of the movie. The scene where the surgeon is cutting the woman open to get the stomach tumour out, he uses a personal flip knife, and then like 2 or 3 of them all stick their hands inside her torso to hold the wound open. It's a natural beach, there's sand everywhere. Where has that knife been? Where have their hands been? It's the most unsterile place to perform surgery, and yet she heals up just fine. No infection whatsoever. Later on, Prisha cuts the surgeon with a rusty knife, and he dies of blood poisoning almost instantly. Consequences aren't consistent. It's a bit silly. We get a cool scene later in the film where the character with calcium deficiency keeps breaking and reforming her bones until she's this messed up creature with bonitis. It's actually horrifying and great body horror, but this is the only instance of this. Why aren't more of the deaths impactful like this? Convenience. The story is utterly contrived, and there is no way around it. The rocks that make them black out if they leave is awful. The rough seas that no one can swim through are actually hilarious because most of the shots, the ocean is calm as hell. The coral that somehow counteracts the blackout spell and or spits them out into a calmer patch of ocean is pointless and is simply a way for the story to have an ending. I would recommend never having so many of these elements all together. Ideally, limit it to one or none of these. Audiences are smart. They know the stink of bad writing. Scale of horror. It's like how any story is written really. Stakes start low and rise until we reach a climax. The same goes for horror. Occurrences start minor and unsettling and build from there. However, M. Night's Old flatlines pretty early on. As soon as the story reveals that the beach is aging the characters, there's very little places for it to go from there. The birth scene is unsettling and the bonitis scene is great, but these are spikes of life in a story that has already blown its load and gone to sleep. But surely, I hear you say, M. Night's classic twist must surely jostle the story awake and demand satisfaction. Surely. No. The twist. Anyone with 2 brain cells can figure out who the bad guys are from the very beginning. We even have shots of M. Night looking at the people dying on the beach. The why is revealed at the end, but who cares about the why? It's almost always the who that is the stinger in fiction. Take any mystery novel, for example. Heck, take M. Night himself. The Sixth Sense, Bruce Willis is a ghost. Unbreakable, Samuel Jackson is the bad guy. The Village, the residents are the monsters the whole time. The Happening, it's the plants and they're out for blood. The Visit, the grandparents aren't the grandparents. Split, James McAvoy turns into an actual monster at the end. Avatar, The Last Airbender, the joke was on us the whole time, and M. Night revealed his true form. I will never forgive you, M. Night. Never. We couldn't care less about the why. We don't remember years later the why, but we usually remember the who. Okay, we've discussed some of the bigger issues of this movie. It's time to get nitpicky. There's a lot you could tear apart in this film, but here are some of the things that stood out to me. No one apart from the kids eat. Ever. If your argument is because the kids need to put on a lot of mass quickly because they're growing, then my argument is the adults would need to eat an equivalent amount to keep their mass on. If the premise revolves around rapid cell formation and death, and it does because M. Night states it does, then they would all need to intake equivalent amounts of energy to stay alive. The law of conservation of energy is utterly ravaged in this movie, so I don't think it's a great choice to point to it when he says this line.
That's a lot of food. Well, kids eat a lot of food, and you got 3 of them with you.
If it doesn't work, why bother bringing it up at all? I hate this line.
It's like my mind is changing too. I'm getting many thoughts at the same time.
I truly hate it. Their minds, their consciousness, their perception of the world around them develops alongside their bodies because of the rocks. It becomes magic at this point, pure, unadulterated magic. But M. Night just had to have his birthing scene. You've got to have that trailer bait. Trailer bait. Okay, so we forgive the premise. We avert our eyes from the obvious magic going on. We ignore the bit about the rocks, and we accept that the resort is using the beach to rapidly age people so they can test their medicines. I can do that. Just. But why let children and old people go to the beach when there is no scientific reason to do so? The kids weren't sick, the old lady wasn't sick. There are probably thousands of people in the world, couples, singles, with horrible diseases who would kill to go to a resort and private beach. Why allow people with children? And how come the police haven't already clued into what's going on here? Did no one ever piece together the fact that a whole bunch of people went to this resort and never came home again? That's some sloppy police work. So are there any redeeming factors to this movie? I guess for me, just the premise in its very basic form. Growing old is scary as hell. Look, I'm doing it right now. But that's not enough to carry the rest of this film's nonsense, and I'm giving this one a 1 out of 10. If you agree with me on this, give this vid a thumbs up, but if you think I gave old a raw deal, let me know about it in the comments below. Now, if you'll excuse me.